Welcome back, everyone, for another Wellbeing Wednesday. This month, I'm really excited. We are focusing on our social wellness. So, that is kind of through the lens of relationships and also the power of positive experiences. We're really excited to welcome our guest, Dr. Allison Stephens from Tufts University Medical Center. She uses her extensive experience in family and community engagement, including family peer support and systems advocacy, to support the relevance of the HOPE framework for diverse families and communities. Allison, thank you so much for being here. We know that you travel a lot and are so busy, and we're just so excited to have you here with us today.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. This is going to be really fun to be able to talk about the importance of social wellness and relationships. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yay! All right. So, as you all know, if you have been to Wellbeing Wednesday before, and if you're new, if you have questions, aha moments, reflections that you want to share, we love seeing those in the comments. And I will do my best to check if there's any questions in the comments as we're having our conversation with Allison today. So, I figure we can dive right in, and I would love to get your thoughts on why does our social wellness matter to our overall well-being, both for children, which I know is a big area of your study, as well as adults?
Sure. So let me give just a little bit of background on what I study. So I work at the HOPE, which is Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences National Resource Center at Tufts Medicine. And essentially, our research has really shown that there is a significant impact of positive experiences on the brain, which also leads then to behavior. And so that part of the social wellness for us really translates into things like relationships, civic engagement, having a safe and secure environment, and opportunities for emotional growth. And so, yes, that of course, and we have lots of research that demonstrates that that has an impact on children. That has an impact even as soon as youth. So when you have these wonderful positive experiences as a small child, you start seeing improvements in behavior and academic achievement, all kinds of things as early as think middle school into high school. But of course, we know that there are also positive impacts for all of us, even into adulthood. It used to be believed that your brain kind of wires as a small child and that's it, right? And now we realize that the brain continues to rewire and rework. And we see that even in medicine now with stroke, people who've experienced strokes and their ability to recover in a way that wasn't thought to be possible. But we also see that in other ways, such as meditation or learning learning a new language, all of those different things. So that social wellness truly has an impact on our biology and the way that our brains are working and how we respond to situations that we encounter. But I think we all know that, right? Like when you're feeling good and you're around people and you have that sort of social wellness and you have those strong relationships, you can tell that there's something different within you, right? That your interactions, you're able to manage your stress better. So that's kind of the research that we do, but that's really why that social wellness is so important. It's what we all kind of knew just in living life, but now we have research that really shows us how the brain is responding. And we also have research that shows how our behavior responds to that social wellness as well.
It's so amazing, this idea of neuroplasticity, which I feel like in early childhood, especially, there's so much of it in our children and their brains as they're developing, they're learning and growing all the time and they're able to process things. And then for whatever reason, we think that we reach adulthood at whatever range or age we think that is. And we're like, oh, that doesn't happen anymore. I'm set in my ways, can't
Mhm.
teach them new tricks. But it is so interesting because, even in my lifetime, I remember when somebody used to have a stroke, it was like whatever was lost.
Mhm.
Maybe you could get some of it back, but it was very unlikely. And now it isn't that way.
Mhm.
A lot of the time, people are able to relearn and actually relearn at a greater capacity than previously. So they might almost be able to get back up to where they were before a lot of the times, not just, oh, it's not debilitating, but actually
Mhm.
getting kind of back to where they were, which is just, again, a real testament to this idea of neuroplasticity. And so with that, I'm kind of curious too. It's a little out there, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on how neuroplasticity is impacted by our social bonds and our social wellness. Like if there's some sort of correlation and what that can look like. I'm just wanting to pick your brain on it.
Sure. So, that is kind of the core of our research. We've really identified specific types of experiences. In particular, like you said, we focused on childhood experiences, but we know that goes beyond childhood. And there are those, four types of experiences that really do impact the brain to lead to healthier outcomes throughout the lifespan. And so one of those is the relationships. And then again, social and civic engagement and some of those other types of experiences. And so, yes, having those social bonds really does have a direct impact because we're social creatures, we're social beings. And I think we saw this quite a bit even with COVID, when some of that social engagement was stripped from people, there was an impact. And we saw a lot of impact on the way people were interacting, which really is a way to reveal what's happening within the brain. I so appreciate and love that you talked about the way that we've learned about this over time. So I want to make sure that we're clear. It is important that young children have positive experiences for brain development. That is really critical, and it can have an impact. What we now realize is overall the brain responds to experiences. So I think at one point we were really focused in and thinking, okay, if there's a trauma, there's going to be an impact on the brain. And that is absolutely true. What we also know is that the brain really needs positive experiences in general. And part of what happens with an adverse experience or traumatic experience is you're sort of blocking some of the positive ones. So, in developing those relationships, which we know is a really critical positive experience, those social bonds that you're talking about, if you're in a home where you've experienced something traumatic or there's some sort of abuse, you've really blocked that positive relationship and the bonding. So we think that's really a critical part of what is happening. But we also know the research shows us that even if you are like most of us, whose lives aren't particularly rosy all the time. And we do have traumatic experiences. We do experience loss and a number of things, right? Unfortunately, that is a part of life. You still can have positive experiences that will have an impact and mitigate or reduce some of the impacts of those traumas. So that social bond, the need to connect with others, the having the secure relationships, the engagement with people who are our peers, and even when we're children with adults, especially adults who are outside of our home, like not yes, your parents, that's important, but also other adults. That could be a coach, that could be a teacher, that could be whomever in your community that waves to you every day when you're walking home from school. Like those are relationships that actually have an impact on your brain. And that does not stop at a certain age. And isn't that like a wonderful message? For all those years, we kind of thought, okay, something's bad happened, and that's who you are, and your brain is sort of defined by that. And now we have some science that lets us know what I think most of us thought was true, which is that we're not defined by the worst thing that's ever happened to us.
That's awesome. And one of the things, you talk about how integral experience is to brain development, to just ongoing neuroplasticity throughout our lives. And specifically in the context of relationships and those experiences throughout either your research or the research that you've encountered, have you found that there are specific relational experiences that maybe have certain impacts, or is it kind of a broad any sort of experience? But I'd love to get your take on if there were specificities within that.
Yeah, so I think you're hitting on something that's really important, which is how broad these concepts are. And that is very intentional, actually. One of the things that we think is really important is cultural context. And so for some people, that relationship may look very different. And it is important for people to be able to define those for themselves. So it is not necessarily that you have to have this particular relationship. It is the fact of having those relationships that has the impact on the brain. So that's really important because you may have, again, someone who has experienced a particular negative relationship in their lifetime, or maybe has experienced some maltreatment with a particular individual. That does not prohibit or inhibit their ability to benefit from other relationships. And so, yes, these are really broad categories, and that's very intentional. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I learned a couple of years ago, time is a little weird since COVID. So maybe it was yesterday, I
It
don't know.
is.
But but sometime recently in the past couple of years, we heard from some individuals who have been implementing the Hope framework in Australia. And one of the things that came up was about this concept of family, because we talk about children and their families and their communities. Well, in Aboriginal communities in Australia, this concept of the family is very different. It is a much more communal concept so that the community is the family. And there are a lot of different cultural groups, globally, but even within the United States, where this concept of family is very different. For some people, having a grandparent in the home is, just a part of the culture. For some people, it's very nuclear, right? There's a lot of different, like, families come in all shapes and sizes, right? And so in the same way, those relationships are cultural as well. So we really do try to leave that open, because the research really shows that it's about having the social bonds. It's not about having a person with a particular title or a particular role in your life that you have to have the relationship with, because again, that sort of takes us back to that old way of thinking, that if you miss out on this one thing, then all of a sudden your brain is sort of derailed and you're going to go down a particular path. And that's just not the case. It really is about the relationships that you have. And so we do hear, particularly with people who, may be from sort of backgrounds that have been marginalized, right? So there are a lot of people who say, I have my family of choice. I have the family that I have created. And it's really cool because when you think about people that you know of who perhaps have had a difficult childhood, but somehow have, really flourished and been successful and thrived throughout their lives, typically they're going to say, like, oh, there was that so and so person, right? It was a teammate, it was a coach, it was my pastor, it was whomever, it was my roommate when I finally went off to college, or it could be any number of people. We hear this and we know that it's true. So, no, there's no prescription as to it has to be this relationship. The brain, we know, responds to relationship. And in my mind, that's pretty beautiful, because it gives us all that opportunity that if we can make connections, then it actually, in our physical world, connecting with others, it leads to connections within our brain for that neuroplasticity. And so, in the same way, it's kind of like, nature, our natural way of being, that need to connect with others is reflected then within the way that our brains connect, and those neurons fire together. And so that's kind of the way to think about it.
Yeah, and I really love that you talk about the cultural competency of it and how it is intentional that it's vague. Like I do love that because sometimes in so many models, and even I catch myself of like, oh, but how is it? Right.
Mhm.
But actually, when we open it up, we allow individuals to decide for themselves what works. A lot of the times, we've shifted in some ways away from the idea of just parents to families because families can look so different now. It's not just biological parents. It's not even just parents, it could be grandparents, aunts, uncles, different community members, foster homes, all sorts of different definitions and makeups. And so I love that, especially in the context of relationships, it is broad in that sense. I know something that I hear sometimes when I do a training is like, I don't like people. I don't people. When I'm done with work, I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to deal with them. And so within this broad definition and this broad scope, I wonder if you have any thoughts for maybe somebody who feels that, if they're very introverted or if they're just like, I just find myself just not wanting to people, how could they still do this or form this somewhere in their life? Or even maybe what is the perspective shift to kind of start to recognize what they are already having or doing in their life? So I'm just kind of curious
So,
brain on
yeah, no, so you're asking about me, right? Like I'm
that. Perfect. Sure.
Right, right. Me and my whole family right now, my daughter's over there, my son's up here,
Yeah,
I'm up
right.
here, right? Like, but we do still have the bond, right? And we still have the
Mhm.
connection. And I think that's a part of it too. I mean, we tend to think of like, cultural competency as this very sort of narrow thing, but the idea is that we are including people for who they are. And you can also have a family, culture. So sometimes, unfortunately, we have these ideas of like, oh, sometimes you go and the sort of professional person says, well, you need to sit down for dinner, right, at the table. And that's how you do this. And that can be a wonderful idea if it fits in with your culture, right? And that means broadly, right, is dinner your main meal? Or that could also mean within your culture. Maybe in your family, everybody just needs a break at the end of the day and you go to your separate rooms and you're able to recharge and refresh in that way. And that's okay. One, you have the acceptance, right? That you all understand each other. That is still within itself a relationship and a bond. But two, yes, you've been interacting with people all day. You do have relationships. You may be doing something else, right? Together when you, even if it's like, hey, we've got to go grocery shop. And you know what? We know how we do this. I know what your favorite cereal is. You know what my rules are and what I'm not going to buy you when we get up to the register, right? And so you still have bonds, and those bonds are important. And particularly for someone like me, and I can only just speak from my personal experience here, it is comforting. And there is a bond in knowing that somebody gets that I've just got to have my time to myself and that I'm not like super into people. That doesn't mean that I don't have social bonds. In fact, the few people that are in my life are people that I just truly love, who I know love me, who I would make tremendous and have made tremendous sacrifice for. And I know they would do the same for me. And so those bonds are actually very, very strong in a way that we may not talk for a month and can hop on the phone or get back together, right? And go back to right where we were. So that's a wonderful question because, again, all of these things are individualized and they come in different shapes and sizes. And everybody's brain is wired a little bit differently. But we know that our brains do respond to those social bonds, to those relationships, to that engagement. But that can be individualized for what's needed for your brain and for where you feel comfortable and what's really going to benefit you. And there's no one who knows you better than you know yourself. So there's no expert who can tell you you should be doing it this way, but understanding that, oh, and I do this myself. I'll go, I don't want to get too isolated. Let's go out and do such and such. And it might just be me and my daughter, right? But I recognize that I do need at some point to be able to interact with others, even if it's just the person who's, working the checkout at the store. So just, kind of keeping that in mind, I think is important. But people know that. People know they're, I think we can trust individuals a little bit more than we are traditionally used to doing. It's okay. And now we have some science that backs it up.
Yeah, I love all of this because again, especially I feel like in American culture, I feel like there's a little bit of an uneven emphasis on extroverts and extroverted lifestyles, get out there, do things, make friends, da, da. It's so much of that. And even though I'm an extrovert, I value those people in my life. And actually, most of the people who I'm very close to are introverts. It's
Mhm.
that balance piece. And so I love the validation that you brought to that topic, especially for anyone who's watching now or watching the replay. You don't have to be a different person. It's again shifting the perspective of, oh, I do have, even if it's just, oh, I go to the same coffee shop, once a week and I see that same barista. That can
Mhm,
still be a social bond. If
mhm,
that's where you're at, that's where you're at, and that's okay. And
mhm.
so I really just love that validation. And again, kind of that perspective shifting. A lot of the times it doesn't require us to make major changes in our lives or change our personality or change what we need. It's like, oh, wait, let me look for those small social bonds. Oh, I do have those. Okay, cool. And it works for me, and that can be
Yeah.
enough. So
Yeah, I think oftentimes people are defining it by somebody else's definition, and that's definitely not what's needed. It's the idea is that you're getting what you need, that you're getting the positive experiences that you need. And some people may need more, right? I kind of think of it, this is my excuse for overeating, right? Like I just need a little more food than you do. So, right, some people need a little more, some people need a little less, and that's perfectly fine. Everybody has individualized needs because we all have these wonderful individual brains that are firing and are wired in different ways. And it's okay as long as we're getting all of the ingredients there, we're going to have, the outcomes that we want to have.
I think maybe it's because it's lunchtime or you talked about eating. Because now I'm like, we all have those different ingredients in our brains, right? And our brains are basically all making different cakes. Like
Mhm.
not everyone's gonna have a pineapple upside down cake. Not
Right.
everyone's gonna have a cherry pie, but it's like all those ingredients are there, and then they produce this beautiful, tasty product that is us, our
Mhm.
individual selves. And so apparently that's on my mind.
Right. Yeah. So sorry. I did
So
that too.
we're
But
fine. We're just making it, this is Great British Bake Off, but Wellbeing Wednesday style. Where we
right.
don't bake anything, we simply talk about it. Because I should not be baking anything. I will guarantee that. So one last kind of question to, if somebody's watching this, especially for early childhood educators, the work that they do is so incredibly important. They pour their heart and soul into it. It can be very draining, and a lot of times, even though that those social bonds can refuel us, sometimes it can feel like one more thing, and maybe
Oh,
if
yeah.
somebody's feeling, especially since the pandemic, I feel like we've all kind of had to readjust what our social needs are individually. And some
Mhm.
of us, like especially some of the providers I talk to, they're like, I want to get more social, but I'm just not, used to doing it as much. So I'm kind of curious, what are some maybe tangible steps or small steps that somebody can take if they're maybe wanting to strengthen those social bonds, or if they're wanting to meet new people or start to build that network for themselves. And I know it's very culturally dependent, individually dependent. I'm just kind of curious to pick your brain if there's anything that comes to your mind to share with us.
Sure. So, one thing. So, I want to see if you can pull up. We have these slides that, if we start at 19, and while you're doing that, what I want to say is I want to call out that I think you just said something really important about neuroplasticity and the way that our brains work, because you mentioned that before COVID, people had one way of operating and they may have shifted, right? Their brains and their needs and what they enjoy may have actually rewired a bit or changed or done something a little different during COVID. And now they're going through a process of readjusting. If we go to one of the things that I would say is, as with children and families, one of the things that we really want to do is start with strengths. And so, one of the things that we can do is to understand what our own strengths are. So, what's going well? What is it that you do well? Are there things that you maybe think you would be good at, but haven't tried or haven't done in a long time? I was just talking to a friend of mine, like, I grew up playing piano and violin, like up through college. And if I sat down, can't play a note, like, not chopsticks, not anything, right? Like, maybe that's something I could be good at again, right? Who are the people in your support system? And also, what do your children do well? And so, starting with your strengths, I think, is a really good way because we talk about that for other people, but we really need to do that assessment for ourselves. So, if you go to the next slide, I just made up a list, right, of some strengths, right? So, I put on there, and this is not me, but my hypothetical person is good at singing. They've got good luck with a hand of cards, right? You're playing a card game, you know that you're good at that. My children play basketball, they're good at that, they enjoy it. And I think I might be a good baker, even though I've never tried it, right? So this is kind of a concrete sort of way to stop and take a self-assessment of like what your strengths are. And then if you were to go to the next one, I started working with this. So on the left, you'll see that list of strengths, right? And so I just picked the top one, singing. So I thought, well, what are some ways that I could do that? And you can do it staying within your personality. How do I take something that I'm good at, a strength of mine, and transition it to start to rebuild those social bonds or develop new ones? And, community or church choir, right? Also, we've got, I not too long ago walked in on my kids who are incredibly close. I've got a son and a daughter, and my daughter's got her little karaoke microphone and she's singing the Pina Colada song. It was very bizarre. And my son was really enjoying it, right? But they're doing karaoke randomly at home using, YouTube for the lyrics and having a great time, right? So that's something where you're building a social connection. You can do that at a local spot, or you could be doing it at home. You could also create and share playlists, and this might be a good way to build some emotional growth as well, right? Here's my mood this week, and putting together a playlist and sharing it among friends or with your family or with your significant other, or however that works. One of the things that we did last year is I love the movie Sing 2. Shh, don't tell anyone. It makes me happy. So we went to a sing along, right? And we're the only people over, like with no kids. So, because it's me and my teenage daughter, like really getting in singing to the movie. It was a $5 movie. Um, you know, and we also turn on the music to make chores a little bit more fun. And, right now, my son is, he does music production and enjoys all of those things. And he was just talking to me about a concert for his friend. And there are a lot of community kinds of events, right? So see how you take that one thing that you're good at. And these are all really good ways that you're able to actually take your strength and use it in a way that's going to build those social bonds and build the relationships. So this was kind of my concrete example of, taking something that you're good at and thinking about your strengths, and not, oh, I haven't done this and what I should be doing. And, oh, I used to be good at this. And, no, like it's okay. What is it that you're good at? What do you think you might be good at? And how do you take that and transition it into really strengthening your social bonds?
I love that. And it's funny because, well, one thing also for those watching, I know a lot of our providers are amazing achievers. And sometimes we'll see a list and I'm like, okay, I must do all of these right now. But the beautiful part is what you're illustrating is like, this is a brainstorm. Like, look at how many opportunities there are. That doesn't mean we
Yeah.
necessarily have to do all of them right away. If
No.
somebody wants to, great. But like seeing this, it's really great because if you do one and you're like, didn't really work out, you can come back to this brainstorm list. It's a great creative exercise. And I love just from that one thing, here's some concrete stuff. And I actually had this happen recently and I didn't even connect it until we're talking because I've been wanting to get out on my bike more, but I am terrified of biking on the road here in Little Rock. It's just, I get nervous. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to signal right. Am I going to be in the
Mm-hmm.
right lane? Well, I ended up finding this group where they make it super safe. Like they have someone, I think it's called guarding. So when this giant group of bikers goes, they kind of like block the intersection just in case the light
Oh.
changes to make sure everyone's safe. So I found this great group of people that are very casual with it, but I feel very safe and I'm learning how to like different ways to handle my bike. I'm learning different ways to ride safely throughout a city, learning different routes. And it's a social thing, but it's also something that I have a bike and I used to bike a little bit more. Why don't I try again? So, I
Mm-hmm.
love that this is concrete and it's just really cool because, again, it doesn't have to be, oh, what do I need to change or overhaul in my life? Sometimes it's, oh, wait, I'm already doing that. And now I'm just, again, connecting the synapses in my brain to say, oh, this is a connection to that. That's what I'm doing. And
Mm-hmm.
even just that can be a huge benefit. And just like what you said with the PowerPoint, just so everyone knows watching, these slides, Allison has been very gracious to allow us to share these with you all. So you will be able to see her full PowerPoint by clicking the link that will be in the chat in the comments. So you will be able to access this as well. And just like it always happens, Allison, this happens every single time I look up and I'm like, how is it already time? I don't know. We just have these really great conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But before we kind of close out for today, are there any last thoughts, advice, or anything that you want to share with us?
The only thing I would say is just to repeating that point about strengths. The social bonds are very important. We've talked about hope, healthy outcomes from positive experiences, and how positive experiences really do actually have really good concrete health outcomes that can help you with, behavioral health, mental health, and also physical health as well. And so it's just important. This is not meant to be pressure filled. This is about looking at what you have and what assets you have and how strong you are and things that you're good at and finding ways to use those or thinking about it in a new way to go, oh, yeah, I am a part of my church choir. That's a social bond. It's something I'm good at, right? You can look at those things. But I also want to make sure people know that none of that's required. I mean, if your biking group doesn't work out and you don't like it, you can try something else too, right? And so that's what this is about. It's about the opportunity that we all have to create positive experiences in our lives and how wonderful that can be for our health.
Oh, I couldn't have said it any better. That is just wonderful. And just Allison, thank you so much for taking the time out of your travel and out of your day to be with us today. I know I really got a lot out of it. I'm sure that people who are live with us here, I've been seeing some reflection points in the chat, so they're getting something
Good.
out of it. All those who watch the replay here and on YouTube, I'm sure that they're going to be jotting down notes, just like I kind of wish I was right now. I'm like, I'm going to watch the replay and take notes for myself. So this has just been really wonderful and wonderful information to share. So thank you again for being here with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Of course. And we are going to wrap up today. So for those of you who have been with us for a while, we are doing Wellbeing Wednesday Facebook events just because it builds in some reminders, and you only have to RSVP once and then you'll figure out when the next Wellbeing Wednesday is there. So please go to the Curricula Concepts Facebook page and RSVP for Wellbeing Wednesdays, and you'll get reminders for each month coming up so you don't miss a thing. And also make sure to follow Curricula Concepts on Facebook and Instagram. This has been another Wellbeing Wednesday. We appreciate all of you being here, and we are wishing you well until our time together next month. Bye, everyone.